I think that one thing that lawyers do, we have this very high standard for ourselves. And so I think sometimes people start to crack on themselves, you're not this enough or you're too that or whatever it may be. And so I love this idea that just by going through the motions of day to day life and functioning, that we could be considered high functioning. I mentioned that the name of your book is Nervous Energy. So it's Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. So let's talk about what you mean by nervous energy. How would you describe it? And how can you use nervous energy to get yourself to feel productive and fulfilled?
Yeah. So nervous energy is what I'm kind of trying to reframe for many people, what they call anxiety, just because they feel like anxiety is something negative. Whereas, again, actually, a person with no anxiety wouldn't even think to look both ways before they cross the street. So, the healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. It tends to actually even give us a little boost of adrenaline. It gives us that extra burst of cognitive focus. The trick is just to make sure that we use it constructively, that we have it pointed in the right direction, so to speak. So, at least to your point, what you just said about perfectionism and the tendency that lawyers have to, as you said, kind of crack on themselves sometimes, um, that can be that nervous energy or that anxiety that's trying to think constructively about, what have I not yet done to prepare for something and how can I better prepare for it? And for many of us, we actually needed to be more iron fisted and tougher on ourselves when we were teenagers or in college or in law school, right? That we had to say, hey, if you don't get home from this party, go to sleep and study for that test, you'll never amount to anything, right? And we almost needed that kind of iron fisted approach with ourselves because the executive lobe wasn't even fully formed in the brain yet. The executive lobe is the part that thinks about future issues and that kind of stuff. But then as we get older, our executive lobe is fully formed, we have more maturity. And many of us are still, as you said, cracking on ourselves as if we are some unruly teenager that needs kind of a very heavy hand to come in. And when the hand is too heavy, because we're using tools that were appropriate maybe for a teenager or a college student, but not necessarily for a seasoned, mature lawyer, then we can get prone to burnout and demotivation when we're too hard on ourselves. So when people notice areas that they're kind of not doing as well as they could be, what I encourage them to do first is to congratulate themselves for realizing it. Because if you think about it, awareness of an area of a need for growth is much better than non awareness. So the first thing that we do is we want to congratulate ourselves. The idea is not that we want to just lapse into a bunch of happy talk and say, oh, well, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and I'm doing great, because the tendency to want to improve and grow is a good one, but we don't want to do it with such a heavy hand that we become demotivated. So it can be helpful sometimes to just start by congratulating ourselves on that awareness and then ask ourselves, what could I do, to support an effort to improve in this area?